Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. Thanks for joining us for the episode number 3, Voice of CIO. Today, I have extreme pleasure and delighted to have Mr. Greg Sanker, industry veteran with 25, HCI's top 25 influencers, has been a veteran CIO for large organizations and has been doing phenomenal work in digital leadership and digital and agile in organizations. So thanks, Greg, for joining us for this edition of Voice of CIO. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. Thanks for having me on the show. I have a lot of energy around these topics, so hold on to your hats. We're gonna dig in. And
Excellent.
you and I, Suresh, always, no matter where we meet up in the world, we can strike up a conversation and go deep. So I hope we get to do that today.
Excellent. So we have this team today, Greg, about digital leadership in action. But just to give a bit of context, a lot of organizations today are evolving, and with this new normal, everybody is talking about an agile organization. But before we get into that, for viewers, give us your perspective around your journey on the roadmap and what's been most interesting for you in the recent times so that we can get to hear your opinion.
So I wasn't ready for that, but this is it's actually really fascinating. So I've spent a lot of time in service management within organizations. I'm a practitioner. I do this stuff, and I'm somewhat irrelevant to best practices. Not because I see anything wrong with them, but because that doesn't solve my problems. People in my organization solve my problems. These are tools that we use to go solve problems. But as I stepped into the CIO role, just that little bit of difference in altitude from being an operations manager to being a CIO, your vantage point, your elevation changed remarkably and your perspective changed. And that really opened my ideas to the incredibly important role of leadership, particularly digital leadership, meaning the role of leadership has changed since the industrial age. A lot of people are talking about that, but digital leadership is something even beyond that, where organizations need things that we don't have. And people are looking for very practical, what do I do? What does digital leadership mean? What do I do tomorrow? And I'm hoping we can get into that. But that's where I've been.
Right. And in terms of setting the context around agile organization, so what would be your definition, Greg, about an agile organization? Would it be like revamping your org structure in terms of squads, tribes, autonomous teams, and whatever you call it? Or what does that look in terms of agile organizations? Everybody has got their own definition. So let's start with the definition of what do you mean by an agile organization, particularly in
So
this.
that's a really great question, because as soon as you say agile, whether it's an uppercase or a lowercase, everybody has an idea of what that means. And it usually has something to do with rapidly delivering software into your organization, which is fine. It's great. But agility is it's a term that's been, existed for many thousand years, right? Agile means that we're able to rapidly determine that there's changes coming, there's something has changed, and respond appropriately to it, right? So hunters, gatherers, survival of the species, and all these things that we've done to say that could hurt, that could go. And so agility has to do with not only just building the capability to see what's coming your way, but also the ability to respond really rapidly. And there's a lot of components to that. So an agile organization is an organization not that has agile software development, tribes and squads and all that. That's fine. That's excellent. I'm not talking that down at all. But agility moves into the boardroom. Agility moves into the senior executive ranks, where it traditionally hasn't been. And that's very difficult for an organization to be agile if your leadership isn't itself agile. And so we talk about what are the competencies that make an organization agile or digital, if you will.
Right. And you talk quite a bit about this digital leadership. So how is that any different from leadership in general? I know we have actually moved from servant leadership to transformational leadership. Now we are talking about digital leadership. Is it the old wine in a new bottle? Is something very different? How do you define that
Uh,
for CIO?
well, so if you think about the evolution of management, let's just talk about management for a second. is if you think about the Industrial Revolution, it primarily was about building products in a factory. The engineering work had been done, and so the role of individuals in a factory was follow the process the way it was designed so that we produce a consistently high quality product. And so a lot of management was simply about make sure everybody is doing their jobs correctly, right? And there's not a lot of leadership in that because you're not going anywhere. You stay right here and do it the same way each and every time. And we had ISO 9000 and all kinds of qualities, total quality management, all these other things that we've done to really drive quality within the idea that we're building through an assembly line. We're building a product that's consistently high quality. But in the information age, in a tech-enabled digital environment, that's not what we're doing here. And so the very fundamental idea of why do you have a supervisor? What is the role of a supervisor? What is it that they're supposed to do? Supervisor, manager, leader within the organization. And it's changed. And what we find is those of us that have been around for a while may be struggling a little bit with, but what if and this is a pandemic, right? We've seen that all through this thing. What if people are at home and they're not doing their jobs? And it kind of is revealing the idea that we don't trust people, right? Because if I'm not watching over them, they're not going to do their job. And the fundamental root underlying issue there is that your role within the organization or your responsibility or your relationships with individuals is flawed in going forward. You don't engage ingenuity and creativity and tenacity to solve problems by telling people stay at your desk or stay at your job and do it the way I told you. You don't know how to solve it. I don't know how to solve it, right? So everything has changed. But the other piece that I want to get as a foundational element, Suresh, is that technology is no longer used to underpin a business. We know that, right? The business is digital. The products that we sell are digital products. And so the technology is intertwined with business strategy. So it's no longer, hey, CIO, make sure that your email servers are up and make sure that the application hosting platforms are functioning correctly and make sure you save money so that we have more money for R&D, et cetera, et cetera. That's a very old role. It still needs to be done. There's certain elements that need to be done, but technology has moved into the business, and it's a whole different game. But get this, with new technologies coming out, 5G is a really great example. Is technology and the support of it, or the reliance we put on, is now getting into some really, really critical parts of our lives, our very health, our very survival, our public safety. All of those things are intrinsically tied to the technology. So the CIO can't sit there hiding behind a service level objective saying, hey, we're all good over here, right? You're in this game. It's very different.
Right. And in terms of this transition, Greg, when you talk about CIO cannot be waiting and watching, he has to be more proactive and get to that board. Is that something as a trend we're seeing about chief digital officers or chief data officers? So I'm
Yeah.
just trying to think loud whether it's kind of overrunning the CIO role. How do they kind of play together in tandem for an overall business outcome?
You have such a nice way of saying, Greg, you might be obsolete. You just don't know it, right? But I think those new roles I think are still evolving. They're rapidly evolving, but they represent exactly what I'm describing is our relationship with technology has fundamentally shifted. And I support the idea that I don't know that there's a be all end all. The CIO used to be the top tech, right? Once you've achieved, you're the top tech, and every job you've done database and coding and all that, and you really understand the business of technology. You can't do that anymore. Technology is moving so fast that you will not be. As a senior leader, you will not be the expert at everything that's happening in your organization. Technologies are going to emerge once you're long done being hands on a keyboard doing technology that are foundational and revolutionary to what we do. And you have to manage that as an organizational capability without really even understanding how it works. I mean, there's a lot of changes in this space here.
Right. And In terms of digital leadership capabilities, and you stress upon this point quite often, telling people, are they prepared to build that digital leadership capability? So, what would you tell us attributes that comprise to build that digital leadership capabilities, and how do CIOs make that happen, or the leadership team makes it happen? Is it going to be a run-of-the-mill programs, or is it going to be a way of looking at different avenues? How are we going to look at? Let's talk about the components, and then how are we going to build that in real time?
So I don't think we have enough time to go into all of what I think are the core capabilities, but let me just list off a few. The ability to empower people, that you're focused less on the processes and the practices and the technologies and more on the cultural and creating psychological safety, possessing and propagating emotional intelligence. Things like breeding curiosity, being curious yourself. But the two I think that kind of rise to the top is that organizational agility, professional agility, and resiliency. And those aren't just because we've been through this pandemic and things radically changed, but new normal, there is no new normal. I hate to tell you that is or what the pandemic didn't do is change everything. What it did was expose that everything has already changed, and we were very, very behind in our thought processes and our service delivery mechanisms. And so the lesson learned is, how do we build an organization for which the pandemic of 2020, continuing into 2021, is not a catastrophic event, but is just part of what we do. And I'm not predicting that we're going to have more pandemics. I'm just saying that business is moving at a rate at which we can't afford to respond to everything like it's an emergency. We have to be adaptive and flexible. And one of those things, and you know that I talk about Cynefin and the sense-making frameworks, but we've got to reform our relationship with two important things. One is failure. Failure is part of the process of learning. We can't be afraid of failure anymore. Me personally, me professionally, I have to just renegotiate that. And the other is complexity. Is in a large way, what we've been doing for a very long time is we've been applying remedies to problems or solutions to problems, implying that everything either is simple or it should be simple, and here's the answer to that problem. But recognizing that things are complicated and oftentimes very, very complex requires a fundamentally different relationship with those things. We have to experiment, we have to explore, we have to run, do some data and information gathering of how is this thing behaving. And this thing can be cloud or infrastructure or even organizational complexities of the politics and the drivers within an organization. And so our relationships with complex adaptive systems needs to fundamentally shift.
So it's no longer about two variables. We have now 6 to 8 variables. It becomes very difficult to comprehend that space. So what do you think about that?
Well, and that's the whole idea of complex thinking, or the theory of complexity, or theories of complexity. And I'm not going to disrespect Dave Snowden and other researchers and thought leaders by explaining it in a few simple words, but it's taken a lifetime. But the idea is that we have to adapt our methods to the level of uncertainty or complexity associated with any given circumstance. So when you mentioned that we used to have fewer variables, one or two maybe, is that was that was a system that was relatively simple, and we could understand it. In fact, we hire engineers or people that have a lot of experience. It's like, yeah, I've been there, done that. I got this. I understand this. So to them, even if it's complicated, they get it. But if you get into complex systems where there are 8, 10, 12, 15 or more variables, and I've never really expressed it in that way, but when there's all of these factors that come together in unpredictable ways, where if you think about the combinations of permutations of these various factors, it becomes astronomically large. So that if you could understand it, the amount of time that would be required for you to develop an understanding to make intelligent choices is out of the question. We can't move at that speed. And so we have to adapt how we do things. We take small steps, we learn. We take another small step, we learn. We engineer failure to the point where it's not going to bring down an entire system. And by that, I don't mean a hosting system or a network or a platform, but is the system of people and processes and relationships and all of the pieces that comprise a digital organization. We have to build agile organizations.
And how do you look at CIOs motivating the millennials? Because it's very clear as we step into 2025, 2030, we're going to see a lot of millennials task force coming in.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
what should be the focus of how does CIO drive motivation when it comes to millennials? That's going to be a big topic, isn't it?
It's a great topic, and if you go back, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 years, this whole prediction that these millennials are lazy and they're self-empowered and all of these kind of nasty things. Then I started having some report to me, and here's what I found out: I want to make a contribution, and I don't want to wait. I want to do something that's meaningful. I want to be given the opportunity to make a contribution, and unlike previous generations of worker. If I can't do that, then I'll go somewhere where I can.
Right.
And so, as a leader within an organization, it's like that's actually a fairly good problem to have. Give them problems to solve, give them the tools, but they also need to understand. And I found that this generation is very open to that. They want to be coached and mentored. They want to be given feedback on, hey, you've missed a mark here. We need to go over there. But it elevates the responsibility of leadership. You must be clear on what is it that we're trying to accomplish. What are those non-negotiables? So regulatory and compliance things, or just operational practices or ethics around how we behave. But beyond that, go and solve problems, right? And that allows people to move very, very quickly when we all understand what it is that we're trying to achieve. But then we work together on figuring out how we actually do that. And by we, I mean the workers, the people that actually do stuff within an organizations.
Right. Our final question would be, what do you think the biggest challenge are going to be facing CIOs in 2021 and beyond? Things are changing so rapidly. We are in a VUCA world, so highly volatile, complex, ambiguous world. How do we tackle this? And what kind of secret sauce would you imbibe for a CIO to be sustaining in this journey?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting thing, because every organization is at a different place in their journey. But directionally, CIOs need to disconnect themselves from being the king of the technicians and really go to work on curating a culture that produces the results that you need in your organization. Because you will not be able to direct each and every person, or even the specifics within an organization. And so you've got to let go of your need to be the smartest technician, the smartest guy in the room, and start empowering people to solve the organization's problem. And you need to build relationships throughout the organization so that you're operating as a partner in the business and leading an organization that becomes an asset to that organization.
So it does it mean that with all this technology front and people talk about automation is going to take care of the job, so we're going to lose people, we're going to look at machine learning, AI. How do you think that we all in IT, I'm talking about generally professionals, can stay still relevant and be added value to the organization? Because people get perplexed about, oh, I'm aging out. Do I have a chance to beat with this old team? So, what is your thoughts for people generally in IT and professionals to secure a place moving forward?
And another great question, right? So, if I've been doing, I don't know why I'm picking on database admins today, but if I've been doing database admin for 25, 30 years, and a lot of that's going to the cloud, a lot of that is being architected by, machine learning, artificial intelligence, et cetera. It's like, whoa, that kind of has taken my job. And I'm not talking about, serving coffee at the coffee shop here. This is very impactful. Thing is, if we are resilient, adaptive individuals and organizations, is not a hurdle. But if we tie our sense of purpose, our sense of value and contribution to, I'm a database person and that's what I do for this organization, as opposed to I'm an IT professional and I solve problems with or without technology as the need fits, then there's always a place for that level of creativity, ingenuity, and problem solving. That's what we need more of, is people who know how to rapidly converge with a team of people that maybe they've never worked with before to solve a problem the world hasn't seen before. That's where we need our people. Artificial intelligence isn't going to solve that problem, at least not in the near future.
Excellent, because it talks about some of the critical thinking and skills that we are talking about solving a business problem. I mean, technology is an enabler, but if you don't have the acumen to solve business problem and make these people get your job done easily and effectively, we have a lot to do it. It's such a treat and a delight, Greg, always to talk about your nuggets of wisdom, and I hope that our viewers would gain a lot of impact by these conversations about what we talked about. Those short, sweet, very impactful. So really thank your time and effort today to share your insights. And I hope we can meet in some conference in 2021.
I'm sure we'll meet somewhere. Thanks for having me on today, Suresh.
Thank you.